concerning risk, do you try to avoid it? Do you try to endure it? Or do you try to embrace it? Because that's the difference between being fragile, robust, or anti-fragile, according to today's recommendation, which is the book Anti-Fragile by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. It's probably the most well-known, or arguably the most well-known book out of the 15 that I'm recommending in this series. But it's actually had a really profound impact on my life. I actually read this book before I started this whole library building project a few years ago. And it's one of the books that actually started to get me involved in reading again, because I found this just fascinating for how many areas this actually goes over. But just to begin with, I want to go over those definitions around this idea of fragility, robustness, and anti-fragility. If something is fragile, then it's very, very straightforward. It's in line with the understanding that you might already have. It's something that's going to break if it goes through some element of stress. So, for example, if I was to drop a glass on the floor and it smashes, it's fragile because it couldn't handle the stress. So as a result, it's going to smash. If we think about something which is robust, then that's something that can really endure the stresses. So, for example, let's say you've just got off the plane and you can see the person taking the baggage from the plane to put it on the conveyor belt, and they're throwing the bags from one place to another. Let's say they're not doing a particularly careful job about the entire thing, picked it up and thrown it on. The suitcase in that sense is robust because it's protecting everything that's inside, but only to a limit. Like in that case there, it will protect everything as long as it's just a man that's throwing it, but it won't be able to withstand, for example, the plane driving over it. It would absolutely destroy it in that case. So there's a limit to its endurance. Whereas when we start to think about something which is anti-fragile, that's something that actually gains from the disorder. It actually gains from the stress. So very, very early on in this book, he uses a fantastic analogy for this, which is the Hydra in mythology. So if we consider the Hydra, if you're not familiar with mythology, I'll really, really simplify it down. The dragon with 3 heads. If you were to cut off one of those heads in the story, then all that would happen is it would grow 2 back in its place. So in that case there, if you're going to try to kill the Hydra and it's got 3 heads, cutting a head off won't do anything because it'll just come back stronger with 4 heads. Cut off another one and you'll get the idea. There's going to be more and more and more. So the idea is the Hydra will be anti-fragile because not only can it just endure the stress, but actually embraces it and becomes stronger as a result of it all. Without this getting too technical and over the top, I want to give you a really simple, practical way of how I've used this in my life. This is admittedly a very, very specific, probably quite bizarre example, but you get to learn a little bit about me as I'm doing it as well. So in terms of anti-fragility in my life, I'm someone who likes music. I like extremely heavy music specifically. For any metalheads out there, I like black metal and death metal. Anything which is like very, very overwhelming. So if as a result of all this, I also prioritize health and fitness in my life as well. So let's say we've got those 2 elements of my life overall. Health and fitness, and we've got love of music. Now, as a result, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to think about it in an anti-fragile sense of how can I combine these 2 values in my life so life becomes effortless, life gets into a flow state, and actually one actually benefits the other. So if let's say it's raining outside and it's really, really miserable, there's heavy rain coming in and there's really strong wind, it's cold outside, everything about it is, for most people, terrible. For me, I will think about that as this is perfect because this will actually add to my experience of this music. If I put in an album which is already very overwhelming and typically traditionally quite a cold sounding music, the worse the weather conditions are outside, the better that music sounds to me because it adds to the atmosphere. So as a result, I actually want it to get colder. I want it to get windier. I want it to get rainier because as a result, my music will sound better to me. I'm fully embraced in that, in terms of the full atmosphere. Whereas as a result, let's say we go on the other side of all this. If instead it's not raining whatsoever, I will still be able to listen to that music and that won't be a problem. So I can go outside and still enjoy it. And I can still also embrace the physical side of this because I'll probably be out for longer as a result of it all. in that situation, it's an anti-fragile situation because no matter what happens, no matter what the weather conditions are, I've got music that I can enjoy, and the weather conditions might make life worse for other people, but they'll make my experience of that moment better. In terms of the physical fitness side of it all as well, it might mean that I go out for longer as a result of all this. Basically, it starts to combine all together. So it might seem like a really, really specific example, that one, but that's how I would start to think about anti-fragility in terms of my values. How do they start to, in a non-obvious way, in a very, very specific way to me, how do they cross over in a way where rather than having to just endure this, rather than having to look at the tension between two things, I can actually have it so that it's a positive spiral. There's a positive feedback between these two things. So just think about it in terms of your life. Think about any things that you are doing where actually the worse the situation gets, the better it actually could be for you in a particular way. I know it might sound like quite a bizarre way of phrasing a question, but that's what anti-fragility is all about. That's what this book is all about in general. It's looking at life in a non-obvious way. And again, just to keep this really, really practical, a lot of people will focus on exactly what it is that they want in terms of goal setting. They'll write down a really clear list of things that they want to achieve, and as a result, they'll go out to achieve them. Whereas as a result of this book, I've done the exact opposite. Rather than writing down things that I want to achieve, I've written down things that I want to avoid. So then as a result, rather than the success of it being I hit this target or I don't, instead what I'll do is I'll just avoid the things that would get in the way of me hitting this target. So as a result of all this, it's referred to, not just in this book, but in general, as the via negativa. It's the negative path. All we're doing there is cutting out the unhealthy aspects. To go back to the example before about physical fitness, if I'm going to the gym, I could optimize my routine. I could know exactly what I'm going to do for the next 3 months, every single day, to aid my recovery, to look at the lifts that I'm doing at the gym itself, to be able to steadily progress in the weights. But if I'm smoking on top of all of that, then that's not going to do me very well in terms of all this. The optimization of the gym is basically irrelevant if I'm still smoking or I'm still drinking. So in terms of the via negativa, what we're going to try to be thinking of is instead, what is it that I can cut out of my life that will just naturally skew me towards health and fitness? And in that case there, even if you didn't go to the gym, but you just cut out smoking, you would automatically become healthier. If you cut out drinking, you would automatically become healthier. If you did both, you'd become dramatically healthier. And in that case, you don't need an overly optimized 5-day gym routine. If you also then went to the gym once on top of all of that, then suddenly your life is going to radically change within about 6 months. But again, none of this is about specific goal setting. It's just about removing the things that are going to get in the way so that success is essentially inevitable. Now, there's so much in this in terms of the economic side of this. There's a lot of maths in here for anyone who's particularly interested in the statistical side of all this. There's a lot of probability discussions. There's a lot of talking around asymmetry in terms of skewing towards the positive. So, for example, as we're looking at this, if I was talking about positive asymmetry, there's a random chance that one of these videos could end up getting 1 million views. It'd be extremely unlikely, but it could fit into the algorithm, and as a result, it could skew enormously upwards. Whereas the asymmetry on the other side is I would still just get 0. Whether I uploaded it or not uploaded it, I'd just get 0 or I get a few views. There's nothing that could compare to the idea of skewing all the way upwards to 1 million. In the same way, if I built an amazing house, but I built it on stilts and there was an earthquake, it doesn't matter how nice I've built the house, because as soon as there's one stress there, then the entire house is going to disappear. That'd be extremely negative asymmetry. So as we're looking at this, he goes into enormous detail on the different ideas with all this as well. But the key thing is very much taking into account this subtitle. To be anti-fragile is to gain from disorder. And if you can get into a stage of your life where you're trying to think about how can I gain from all this disorder, all this chaos, all this confusion that is around me, and I can use that to my benefit, then suddenly everything is fuel towards the person that you want to become. That's very much the process behind building all of this library and behind looking at a lot of these books. I'm not always thinking, here is exactly what I want to take from this book and here's exactly how I'm going to apply it. I'm very much just keeping an open mind as I'm going through a lot of these, because one of these books will naturally have that asymmetry approach. Not all 100 books are equal. There's been about 15 as I'm going through this process, which have really, really stood out. And it's justified another 85 of, although I've still enjoyed them, let's say I didn't, those 15, the positivity I got from them has outweighed the negativity of the other 85. So as a result, I'm gaining from all of this. But this is beside the point anyway with all this. I want you to just pay attention to this little rubric of, is this a fragile decision, a robust decision, or an anti-fragile decision that I'm making? And as a result of all this, when I think about the via negativa, the negative path, what is it that I should focus on not doing rather than focus on what I should be doing? And as a result, that will just skew you towards the desired future that you're looking for anyway. It takes a lot of pressure off. It means that you can be a lot more creative. You can be a lot more spontaneous. And linking back to some of the other books in this series, it means that you can pay more attention to your body as well with all of this, rather than just being intellectually planning all the time. So that's why this book recommendation is Anti-Fragile by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, by the way. I think it's Taleb. There you go.